Well, good morning. The clock looks like it's 11 o'clock over at my end of the world. Trust it is the same at yours. Good morning and welcome everyone to HR Primed, New and Young Workers. This is a great session we have set for you, and I thank you for participating and getting signed in. Just a couple of housekeeping issues if you wish, and there'll be some reminders as things move ahead this morning as well. We will be open to questions and answers at the end of the session. So you do have a chat box that you can utilize and open that up for Q&A box. You can open that up and submit your questions, and we'll get through the ones we can at the end of the session, and we'll get started. So new and young workers at H&S musts for your summer workers. For many workplaces, and you're probably one of them, which is why you've signed in this morning, and welcome to this session. Trust you are well, trust everybody in your workplace as well. And if you have started or you're just about to start your work after the COVID situation or during this COVID period still, trust everyone is keeping the social distancing and doing all the other right stuff, and that you, your family members, and all your colleagues are in good health. This session is going to be a session which I hope you will find informative and helpful as you go along. So the hosts for the session and mention of your free offer as being a part of this session, myself, Dan Seuss. I'm a senior health and safety consultant with a little over 30 years of experience in the field, having worked in numerous manufacturing and other types of industrial workplaces, as well as public sector workplaces and others to boot. I've had many years of enjoyable experience and continue to plan on doing quite a few more. And it's a real wonderful thing to be connected with HR Primed as one of the health and safety specialists within that group. Also, unfortunately not with us this morning, but worked with me very closely to help set up the session, Chris Goodall, CRSP. He's also a senior health and safety consultant with many years of workplace experience in various industries. And between Chris and I, we go back and forth and compare notes and make sure that when we offer advice and services to the clients that we serve through HR Primed, that we make sure we've got the best that we can get. And in some cases, if we don't have all the answers, which is very possible, we definitely know how to seek out answers among our network. So hopefully that will be something to consider when you look at HR Primed. Just a disclaimer, the content discussed in this session does not constitute any legal advice. Should you require legal advice and don't have access to legal counsel, feel free to contact us. We can direct you and provide some resources and network with you to give you that information should that be necessary. This session really contains a lot of information directed both towards the new and young worker. So as you will see in the session, there will be direct messages to them, as well as yourselves as employers and supervisors as the case may be. So this information will be very useful for everybody. The free offer we have for you is providing you a store credit where you'll receive a code to receive $75 off the purchase of any HR Prime product. So please feel free to use that opportunity to join in and take advantage of that. So the outline we have, as I mentioned at the onset and while people were waiting, we will have a Q&A session at the end. You do have access to a Q&A box or a chat box. Feel free to utilize that and provide questions that come to mind through the session. And we'll go through the Q&A at the end as much as possible, get through that and provide you with the answers you may be looking for. And as we get through these topics, we'll discuss this in account with COVID-19 considerations as well. We recognize that not all workplaces are back to normal. In fact, most are not. And this consideration must be taken into account throughout the presentation. So please keep that in mind as we go through. We're going to cover what your employees need to know, and also you should as the leaders of your organization. We'll also review some of the legislative requirements associated with new and young workers within your workplace, responsibilities and the role that everyone has to play with respect to responsibilities. And everyone does have a role, and trust you understand that already and are just participating here to make sure that you got that clarified. We'll also provide you with a few links of health and safety resources that will be helpful to you for your consideration and use as part of this session. So just as a matter of perspective, employers and employees must be on the same page. So it's really important that the information that we're providing here is geared towards both the new and young worker and yourself. So keep that in mind. Young workers are vulnerable workers. Vulnerable workers require more training, supervision, and leadership than does the traditional worker who's been around the block. But even there, sometimes they may be considered new workers and may not be familiar with your workplace or workspaces that you use. So there too, you may want to take the opportunity to use this information for people that are just joining your organization. As part of a statistic in Ontario, every day on average, nearly 20 young workers under the age of 25 sustain lost time injuries or are killed on the job. This is a gruesome statistic when you think about it, certainly not something we want to have, and we do not want people to get hurt at work. Protect yourself and protect those around you. That's one of the common themes in health and safety. Through a young worker's eyes, we expect that both employees and employers would attend this webinar. So even if you don't have employees, your new and young workers attending this webinar, it will be available. It is being recorded, and we would ask you to take the opportunity to have your new and young workers go through this session together with you as part of their orientation and onboarding. The first segment of this webinar has that perspective of the new and vulnerable worker, and employers can best understand how to proactively meet these needs. So even though the voice is directed towards, for the first part of this presentation, towards the new and young worker, I'm sure you'll find this information helpful as well. Safety for young workers. We want everybody to get home safe at the end of the day. Whether you're a young worker or not, but certainly, again, the focus here is the young worker. The first step in the process, or one of many steps, is getting the training, ensuring that the knowledge is power and is protection, and making sure that the knowledge is transferred, making sure too that the knowledge that you've intended to transfer has been received. Supervision of vulnerable workers need assistance and guidance. A direct leader is a valuable must, and probably more than just the regular supervision that is provided to experienced workers, maybe a little more attention, not just maybe, definitely more attention towards the young and new workers to ensure that they're doing and all the right things that you expect. Wearing the gear. Be sure to use the correct personal protective equipment, know why it's required to be worn, and ensuring that it fits properly and how to make adjustments. PPE is a powerful part for overall protection, and it's part of everyone's role, again, to ensure that that takes place. Within the workplace, you must identify the risks, and often one is told by the employer or the supervisor where to look for the potential dangers. Part of the orientation process should include physical tour of the work area that the workers are expected to work in, and highlighting those potential danger areas or zones, as well as the rules, policies, and procedures that go along with them. Asking questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. If you don't know, ask. And we highly encourage this particular action from new and young workers. They tend to be, as you probably know, shy in the sense that they don't want to look dumb or think that, that's a stupid question, why should I ask that? Or no one else has asked that question, I may not want to be the first. But encourage people to speak up and speak out. Following safety rules. Every workplace has a number of policies, procedures, and rules in place. As a new and young worker, you're not doing your job properly if you're not following the requirements that will protect yourself and everyone around you. And that's a key message too that we hope that is shared with all workers, as well as, of course, the new and young workers. Reporting hazards. So this is a key tool, a key instrument that everyone has. And again, new and young workers, if you see something, say something. New and young workers often aren't familiar with some of the things within a workplace that they've dealt with. Even if they've been returning, things may have changed, or conditions may have changed, or people may have forgotten what is around in their workplace. If you see something, say something. If one is hurt, all injuries must be reported, no matter how minor. Even though it may seem like a minor injury, scrape, cut, those can become more serious if not paid attention to appropriately. And self-care is not always the best solution. And again, too, young people may tend to want to be shy in reporting that they've been injured, thinking that, oh, that doesn't reflect well on me. Well, encourage all young workers and new workers to report every injury. Talking to one's family. Off-the-job support is tremendously valuable. Parents of young workers have been there before and probably can relate, and probably in most cases have great advice as well. And even though young workers may not be tending to want to talk to their parents so much about their new work, hopefully they're excited enough, and the family is excited enough to help support that new and young worker on the job. Everyone has a role to play. So let's talk about safety for young workers in particular. We would like and share this information again. If you're a young worker watching this particular video, be honest. Honesty is honorable and powerful. So making sure that you're using that tool of honesty to support yourself. Never assume. I think most people have seen that term before, taking the word assume and breaking it down into its parts. Don't assume you can do a task without instruction, guidance, or supervision. Even if it's a task that's been done before, but you're just not certain, or you just want to make sure that you get it right, always ask. And 3 rights: the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to refuse unsafe work. We'll speak a little bit more about those when we get into the legislative portion of this presentation as well. But those 3 rights are fundamental in Ontario legislation. In fact, when Ontario revised its legislation many years ago, these 3 rights became enshrined and are very powerful as well. That also brings out the fact that everyone has a role to play, and it's important that everyone plays their role and becomes part of the system. And in any event, if there are any questions in terms of what your workplace does and how your roles are played out, please feel free to call HR Prime. That's what we're here for. We're here to provide you the support and make sure that you've got the right things being done the right way. So a little plug for HR Prime and our support for you. So let's move into legislative requirements. Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, there are a few musts that employers have. One of the things that employers have to do is ensure that the equipment, materials, and protective devices are provided, maintained in good condition, and always used as required by law and the workplace requirements. The law is an interesting character in that if your workplace requirements are greater than what is required by law, which is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, if it's often called a best practice, that is a good thing, and it's also enforceable by law. Ensure that workplace health and safety policies, programs, measures, and procedures are current and always followed. A lot of workplaces have a good number of these tools available to them, and it's important to make sure that they're refreshed, maintained, updated, and shared with everyone concerned. Providing ongoing information, instruction, and supervision to protect workers, worker health and safety awareness in 4 steps, and you'll notice that's in quotations. That is a requirement that was brought into legislation in 2013. And in some cases, workplaces have forgotten about the fact that this exists. And any person coming into your workplace, new young worker or even an experienced worker, is required to have gone through this particular module, and it's available through the Ontario government website, Ministry of Labour website in particular, if you take a look for that. It'll be referenced again later on in resources. Knowing the hazards in your workplace and making sure that workers and their supervisors are aware of them is, again, another key function. And it's the employer's must to make sure that that is in place and that they've got the right supervision available to ensure that the hazards are managed in the workplace. Assist and respond to and cooperate with health and safety committees or representatives as required by law. Depending on the size of your workplace, you may have a joint health and safety committee if you're 20 plus in the workplace, or if you're between 5 and 19, you must have a health and safety representative. And those are key people to help make sure that your health and safety system, in fact, are in place and working properly. So there's a brief overview of some of the legislative requirements, the main ones that work towards helping and supporting your new and young workers. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that complying with sector-specific minimum age requirements and, in quotations, take every precaution reasonable under the circumstances. That particular phrase comes from the legislation directly and is a requirement for both the employer and the supervisor to take every precaution reasonable under the circumstances for the protection of the worker. Check with the legislation relative to the type of workplace that you are, making sure that the minimum age requirements for your workplace are being met as part of that requirement as well. Have we got any supervisors on board here as part of this? If you're a leader within your workplace, you are also considered a supervisor. So let's take a look at some of the must-dos as per the Occupational Health and Safety Act. One of the musts, as spoken about before, is ensuring that workers perform their jobs as prescribed by law and your rules and regulations in your workplace, as well as using the appropriate equipment, protective equipment, and devices that are required by law and the employer. Another must for supervisors is explaining actual and potential dangers. The general and job-specific workplace hazards are also covered, and making sure that that information is shared with people. One of the challenges here I put forward to you is validate or verify that when you've explained something, that you get feedback, not just a nod of the head or a question saying, did you understand that? And guess what their answer is going to likely be? Oh yeah, sure. Let's move on. Ask specific questions to gain the feedback to let you know that they heard what you said. Providing workers with written measures and procedures for their protection where required by law is also a very critical component. So where you have complex tasks or tasks where the hazard is going to be quite significant, then it's important to ensure that there are written measures and procedures for those in place. And it's up to the supervisor to make sure that they're being followed. As a leader in the workplace, and that should include every one of us that's a part of this presentation today too, you are a leader in the workplace. Encourage these best practices. So here we're giving you some tips in terms of things that you can do to help yourselves and your workplace. Include health and safety in your company's strategic plan. If you don't have a strategic plan, again, HR Primed is more than happy to work with you to help develop that. But make sure that that is part of what your workplace consists of. Model your own consistent, safe work practices. You lead by example. Shortcuts? If you want to take a shortcut, think about the shortcut you're going to take when you're going home as opposed to one you would apply at work. Do what you say what you do. You're a model, and what you do speaks volumes in front of others. Reinforce your company's health and safety priorities in all workplace communications. You may have various means of communication, and again, those various means may be very important and valuable. There's face-to-face, there may be safety talks involved, and you may have memos going up. Again, making sure that those means of communication are properly transmitted and utilized. Encourage all workers to alert their supervisors of danger. Again, have them speak up. If they see something, say something. Introducing new workers to health and safety managers, your joint health and safety committee members, or health and safety reps, as may be the case within your workplace. Have them get introduced, make them feel that they're part of the organization and they also have a role to play and can interact relative to health and safety. Arrange for experienced workers to coach new workers. Now, with that being said, I would also challenge you to make sure that those experienced workers that you are teaming up with a new worker are in fact the most appropriate experienced worker in terms of their ability to coach and their ability to do the right thing, and the fact that they are good leaders in that respect as well. Encourage supervisors to periodically take young workers on health and safety inspections. You as a supervisor should be conducting regular inspections, at least of your portion of the workplace, if not others within the workplace. Have a new worker join you as part of that experience as well, so that they can see safety in action. And encourage new and young workers to come forward with ideas and suggestions. If you already don't have a suggestion or idea system in place to help encourage people to share, this may be a good starting point right now. And getting new and young workers to be a part of that is definitely valuable for everyone concerned. As promised earlier, here are some health and safety resources that you can use to help ensure the health and safety of your young workers within your workplace. A couple of good websites, and you don't have to capture these necessarily right here, right now. You can review this video again later. The YWAP, or Young Workers Assistance Program, they've got a great website with great information. As you'll see, the second bullet point there is the labor.gov.on.ca. That's the Ministry of Labor's website now, the Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development, and they have a young workers portion of their website dedicated to this particular topic. For employers, again, you can go to the Government of Ontario website, and tips related to young workers are also found there, and this particular link gets you at that location. In addition, 12 tips for staying safe at work. Again, the Ontario website has that information in the tips section of their webplace. Along with HR Primed and our health and safety experts, between Chris and myself, more than happy to help out anytime. And hopefully you already have this link well ingrained and well set up in your system to help you to help yourselves through HR Primed, and more than happy to do so and helping you along the way. I'd like to give a great shout out to Wages Corp. They're a happy customer and a great sponsor of all of the HR Primed activities. And here is their contact information. They provide hiring, training, administrative types of work relative to the things that you might be looking for your workplace. If you need assistance there, please take note of this and use up their services. We're glad to be a part of cooperating and working along with. Now we're going to turn the floor over to your Q&As. Hopefully along the way, you've provided some questions and answers, and I have a few here in front of me already to help out with that. Before we get into that, just a couple of notes here. HR Primed is one-click compliance, unlimited new employee usage for 1 year for $5.95. Go to the website for more details. If you're looking for on-call support program, we also have an annual for under $900 a year. Again, come to our website and take a look at the details associated with that. Before we get into the Q&A, let's do a quick shout out to those people within HR Prime that have been very instrumental in making sure that we've got the right support. Pardon me as my clicks are a little out of sync here. Sheila has been a senior HR consultant. She covers the British Columbia region. Morris Zarko, our senior HR consultant, covering Ontario and other regions, and as well as his ability to speak French keeps us in line with any needs in that regard. Steve Caron, Senior HR Consultant with HR Primed, has been around pretty much from its inception and is a key player within HR Primed as well. Chris Goodall, my compatriot on the health and safety front, who unfortunately wasn't available for this website. He's been around, as I mentioned, a number of years and provides great health and safety support in Southern Ontario. And I've already spoken about myself, so I'll skip over that one for now. Neil Crosby, he's been with HR Primed as well as part of its inception. CHRL MBA, Director of Business Development. Great dynamic individual, and as you'll find out if you haven't already interacted with us, part of the positivity within the great creation of HR Primed. Benjamin Tanisha, she's been with us for a little while now and also provides great positivity and allows us to take a look at things from some new perspectives that she brings along. And she also provides us with some content development. And you'll see an upcoming presentation that involves her significantly. Taylor has been an HR consultant with us for just a very short period of time, but has taken on the role quite eagerly and is active as well with HR Primed. And last and certainly not least, we have Darcy Michaud, who is our CEO and Chief HR Consultant as part of this organization. Along with Darcy, we have his compatriot, which isn't coming up on my screen right now. There we go. Is our HR Primed mascot. So let's go into some of the Q&As that we have ready for you. One of the first questions I have up here is worker health and safety awareness in 4 steps. One of the ones that I mentioned there in quotations was mentioned. Is that something that is required by all of my workplace workers, including young workers? And if you recall, believe I may have answered that question. It's been around since 2013. And yes, it is required by everyone in the workplace to have gone through that at least once near the beginning. If you've got workers who've been around since at least 2013 and they've done it, there's not an absolute requirement to do it again, but it might not be a bad idea to review that or refresh it. But certainly new people that are coming into your workplace, or if you have contract workers that are regular makeup of your workplace, making sure that they have got that. And certainly new workers can benefit from that. And as also mentioned, I'll just put a plug in for the 5 steps for supervisors. Make sure that those people get those, anybody who's leading the workplace teams. Another great question I have here is, my workplace is small. What obligations are there for young workers to provide their own health and safety and protective equipment, personal protective equipment? Well, ultimately, the answer to that one is ultimately it is the responsibility of the workplace to provide workplace required PPE. Should you require the need of protective footwear, ensure that the correct footwear is specified, and where necessary, provide the worker with footwear, or otherwise an allowance or a reimbursement may be provided to make sure that they have what is needed. That's what we call a best practice. So the PPE is an important aspect of what you have within the workplace. Some employers require employees to pay for items as a condition of having a job. This practice is not prohibited by the Employment Standards Act in Ontario. However, an employer may make a deduction from an employee's wages for the cost of those items only if the employee agrees in writing to have a specified amount deducted. So make sure that if that is a requirement within your workplace, that you have it clearly identified and it's upfront and it's part of your workplace orientation and onboarding process. Along with that question, there's a question with respect to young workers and their ability to sign off on documentation. Well, if they're old enough to work in your workplace as designated by the specific type of workplace that you have, and you're making sure you're hiring at least that minimum age and above, then they are obligated by those requirements that they are basically approved to sign off on their behalf for that purpose. Here's another great question. And thanks for these great questions. If you have any more as we're going through these, again, please feel free to add them in. I'm in an office setting. I don't quite know what my health and safety obligations are for young workers. That's a great question, because often we take a look at certainly a manufacturing environment, which is different, but what is the difference, or why would we look at this in an office setting? Although likely this is a setting with fewer hazards than in a factory or other physically active work type of setting, your internal assessment of risks and associated protective measures would still apply. So do an assessment of the risks within an office space and making sure that you have all the right rules, regulations, and requirements in place and stipulated. And that should be part of the orientation process as you go through with new and young workers coming into an office setting. On that note, even within an office environment, one of the requirements by legislation is workplace violence and harassment must be part of your overall policy within your workplace. So making sure that even if it is just an office employee, that they also have attended and participated in your workplace violence and harassment policy understanding, and you've given them a training session on that. So, does the focus on young workers mean extra work for supervisors? Well, as with any new worker in the workplace, yes, there is an additional attention required to ensure the young worker's safety. This is part of workplace due diligence. Remember, we talked about taking every precaution reasonable in the circumstances? Well, I'm sure you would probably agree that having a young worker within your workplace is considered reasonable, that they may not quite understand all the ins and outs related to dealing with what a workplace has. So making sure that they've got all the right stuff in place is a good place to ensure that you're making them aware of those hazards and making sure that the appropriate attention is given to those types of areas. And that's where a good supervisor leader comes in. Here's another great question. How do I deal with a young worker who does not want to follow the company health and safety protocols? Well, that's a great question. You may have, as you may have seen with some of your experienced workers, you may have some disturbers or people who may not want to comply with everything, but it is you as the workplace leader, as the owner, the manager, or the supervisor, making sure that all of your health and safety protocols, policies, procedures, and rules are being followed. So as with any worker, your workplace must ensure that those protocols are being dealt with appropriately, being followed, and where appropriate in terms of repercussion, discipline, and application of disciplinary action needs to take place as well. And this too must be covered in your hiring process for all workers, making sure that you let them know that that is part of what is expected of them and that you duly, diligently follow through with that and don't turn a blind eye to people who may not want to follow all your rules and regulations. Again, setting the example by leadership is an important role that you play. Here's another great question. There are a number of requirements to ensure appropriate access, such as accessibility for Ontario Disabilities Act. So for those people that are in that condition or situation where that act falls into place, where applicable under Ontario's legislation, if you are uncertain of your workplace's position with respect to that. So making sure that where you have a person who may have a service dog or may require adaptive technology and young workers when it comes to health and safety, making sure that you follow those requirements under the AODA is a good example of how to deal with that. And for some workplaces, this may not be a norm or a general condition that you have within your workplace. Again, use HR Prime, contact us. More than happy to help you out. We have the expertise internally to be able to assist and ensure all the right things under AODA are being followed. Do health and safety protocols apply even if the student is an unpaid internship? Ah, there's a great one. So here's just a very general high-level view. Employers who offer internships that are not approved by an educational institution should review their programs and practices to ensure that they are meeting their legal obligations under the Employment Standards Act. And again, if you are uncertain of the workplace's position on internship, contact HR Prime. So just a quick note on that one. Some workplaces consider certain workers as interns. If they're not following, if you as a workplace are not following a very specific internship program, then you may consider them an intern, but according to the legislation and the Employment Standards Act, they may not actually be a true intern. So again, if to be certain, contact HR Prime. We're more than happy to help you out, ensuring that you've got the right things that are being followed. As of right now, I don't have any other questions up in front of me. Along with me, I do have some of my colleagues from HR Prime. If any of you guys or gals wish to speak up and offer any additional tips or suggestions relative to Q's and A's, more than happy to chime in right now. I'll give you a couple of minutes to get in there. Any takers? Don't want too much dead air. We're going to have some good music here in the background soon. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Trust the session was helpful. Again, feel free to get in touch with HR Prime. Don't forget our free offer, $75 for any product that we have at HR Prime. More than happy to help you out with that. This session has been recorded or will be presented as a recording available through HR Prime's website. So feel free to check us out afterwards. And again, I encourage you with your new and young workers, should you be bringing any of them on board, this is a relatively short, easy session for them, hopefully to follow along with your guidance. Please make use of that as well. More than happy to have you join in on this recorded session as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your great questions. Hopefully the answers provided are helpful. And with that, I'll wish you a great, healthy, and safe balance of the week. Enjoy your upcoming weekend. And summer is just around the corner, officially starting, even though the heat is starting now. Keep up to date with everything that you need through HR Primed, and I wish you a great day. Thank you, and goodbye.